motion that you all are making associated with these programs, but it doesn't. I guess it doesn't have to be.
We would have to, and I'm sorry to confuse you, we would have to come back again for another budget. I was just thinking that we would do a budget for incentives program.
Okay.
And looking at whether it's $1 million or $2 million or $3 million dollars, and I think that's something that we will have to work out.
I do think that we want to put it together because we don't want to linger, to have to keep coming back before the body.
It might be good to have some of your input in terms of what type of budget, how it would look. But the 250 people that we're focusing on right now would be for that particular pilot.
Right.
Ms. McBride, I'm going to ask you to let's try to restate.
Could you restate that, Mr. for me?
I can, but I want to clarify that I've been corrected that because of the timeliness that this would not actually make it to council on Tuesday. I think I was wrong about that, but
we could put in, but if we put it in.
That's kind of out of my
couldn't we
my
put
range,
in
so.
Mr. Livingston to make it to council on Tuesday?
Yes, if you get council to vote to add it to the agenda.
So I just wanted to correct myself in case I misspoke. But
3 people. 6 people.
So my understanding of the motion that you were attempting to make is to implement a pilot program specific to the date of October 30th to coordinate with the University of South Carolina and the Meeting Place Church. And at that pilot program, it would be a gift card incentive. The limit would be 250 gift cards. The debit card amount for those cards would be $100. Separate and apart from that pilot program, there is a pilot program associated with a weekly prize. Right now we have one prize, which would be eligible participants would be those who got vaccinated or those who received a test within a certain time period. And they'll be in a raffle, a lottery type of system to win whatever that donated item has been to Richland County.
Great, thank you. This is what I said. Do you have that, Ms.?
I clear on the test. I'm okay with what.
Well, the premise behind was that we're just trying to include individuals, as we talked about before this body, before the individuals who are saying, hey, I did the right thing. I got the vaccine, in February. What about me? So we're trying to include them. I think it may even be better for us to separate and just go with the first pilot program, and let's just stop there with the first pilot program and the weekly incentives, which would include testing. We'll revisit that at a later date. And then that way we have the pilot program that's strong, and if it works, then we already know that we can move it to other parts of the county. Ms. McBride?
You want to amend it?
I want to amend it.
I accept your amendment.
Well, this amendment, primarily because my main concern is vaccination.
It was not,
I thought it was a second.
I thought Miss, did you?
I'll second for discussion. So we can move on real quick.
So, are we clear?
I'm not.
The motion is the motion is for a pilot program with the meeting place in the University of South Carolina Medical School for October the 3rd for vaccinations with for at least for 250 people with a debit card of $100, and you've already stated.
What's happening on that day?
Oh, that is the day that there is a big drive to have people vaccinated, to have people tested, and as well as public information that will be going on. And it's county-wide. and it's being a large marketing, the media, all the media in Richland County. So it's a county-wide, and it's a big event. There would be a lot of entertainers coming and different activities going on outside. But the USC will have mobile vaccination. We have the time. And the goal, I thought, was to try to get things done before Thanksgiving holiday, because usually we see a spike during holidays.
So our next meeting is the 5th, which is next week. Is there any further discussion?
Like I've heard. October the 30th. Excuse me?
30.
30th. Okay.
Okay, I thought it was sooner.
Okay, yeah, so that's, yes.
Okay.
Not the 3rd, but the
30th.
30th.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That's what I was thinking, that's what I was asking.
Okay.
Now,
October 30th.
again, are we mainly talking about the incentive just for vaccination?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But at the same time, that's all we're talking about, but other things will be going on. Mm-hmm.
This will allow us to have a pilot program. We'll be able to gather some data to see how things work, and then we'll be able to determine additional programs throughout the county from this point on. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Black, please call the vote for the motion on the floor.
McBride?
Yes.
Livingston? Barron?
Yes?
Newton? Motion passed.
Great. And we're going to move to our next item, and that is the infomercial. Mr. Brown, have we gotten any movement on that yet?
No, ma'am, we have not gotten any movement, but I would expect that you would be hearing from the PIO's office, so I know we're kind of bumping up against time, but you should be hearing from them to move forward with working with members of council who are interested in doing that. And then, again, the idea is to put that out in a public forum to include all forms of media, including what you would see if you're watching TV.
Any questions for Mr. Brown on the infomercial? Moving right along to the next item, and then Mr. Brown, this is the item where we did add C&D, grants
Yes, ma'am.
management, as well as utility delinquent receivables. So if you'd like to address those items at this time.
Yes, ma'am. So the first item should be located on page 17 of your packet, and that item is the premium pay. We did, if you recall, council did approve premium pay, and once you did that, there were several persons throughout the county, all departments, elected, non-elected, who wanted us to make sure that we considered the value of those people who worked remotely and in person. So the original stipend that we paid out basically dictated that you had to basically come in and work in person, a similar schedule to work you previously worked before the pandemic. This would recognize individuals who also worked, but maybe they didn't work the exact same schedule. So say, for example, you would normally work 5 days in person, but now you work 3 days in the office, your normal schedule, and work 2 days remote, those types of things. So we certainly acknowledge that those individuals did come in and that their work had value and that they had, when they were in person, the same exposure opportunities that others had. And so we're bringing this back to this body to determine whether or not you would like to also pay those individuals for the time that they worked in person under the same guidelines that we use to address the other folks. The amount you can see is different, so I'll give you a reminder for those responders and frontline personnel. We did $5,000 for them. We came back and said office personnel who had and worked their regular schedules, we did that at $2,500. You can see that was half. And then this amount of $1,250 would be half of the $2,500, recognizing that those individuals did not work the full in-person schedule, but they worked some substantial modified portion of that schedule. So that's what's before the committee today. I do think that there is value in that. If you ask me if I had a recommendation related to this, I would recommend that we value those in-person services that were provided because some of those individuals were told because your work does not require in-person every day, then you cannot be here because we're trying to limit your exposure. So I do think there is value to that, but that would be my recommendation, and I would certainly take any consideration from council and any questions related to that recommendation at this time.
Before I open it up to the body, I want to just bring our attention to page 2. It appears that this would impact 490 employees to the sum of $660,000 that we would spend out of our ARP funding. Any questions for Mr. Brown?
Does this include elected and appointed officials?
You mean themselves or their offices?
Those and other offices.
Okay, it includes their staff, but you have not made a decision. Well, that's not true. Originally, you did not include any department heads or elected officials. So that's something that we talked about before as to whether or not you wanted to include them, but this does not anticipate department heads or elected officials, only those staff until council tells us otherwise.
Further discussion. All right, then Ms. Newton.
Is there a minimum number of days that they would have had to come into the office?
There is not a minimum number of days, but if you would like to qualify this to add a minimum number of days, then that is this body's purview, because none of this is required for us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. First, let's say that so I do have some questions. And so one question, and we might need to take it at another time because I don't want to confuse this issue, but we had Richland County employees who really did extraordinary work, just a yeoman's task, adapting to new systems, new processes, working different and long and varied hours to make sure that the county government continued to run. And so I understand that with this item before us, what we're discussing are employees who came into the office sometimes and worked at home others, and sometimes it was because we mandated them to do so. So they're employees who would have been here and collected, even more of a stipend or what have you, had they been allowed to do so. But my question is, are there other employees during this time who may have, for whatever reason, been required to be fully remote, but who were working extraordinary hours during this time? Again, I don't want to muddle this issue, and if we need to talk about it later, we can talk about it later. But I think that one of the issues that we're addressing is one of equity and fairness and of appreciation to our employees. And I just want to make sure that we're looking as comprehensively as possible. So I talked for 5 minutes, but the question in there is about employees who worked remotely, perhaps, lots of overtime, but maybe weren't paid overtime. Do we have a lot of employees like that?
So the last thing you said, I want to make sure I clear that up real fast. No, you didn't mean that. But anybody that worked overtime, we paid overtime.
Right, that's why I tried to.
Okay.
I tried to dial that back. Yes, we followed every law, Mr.
Absolutely.
Brown. I know it.
We absolutely did. Now, in terms of what you're trying to get at, is in terms of fairness and equity, I think it is a separate question because I want to remind everyone in a very positive way, not meaning to be negative, but no Richland County employee was put in a position to choose safety over life. So I'll say that. Okay. Now, so this stipend would be something that is representative of, to your point, an additional level of appreciation for being exposed to COVID-19. And so there are individuals who may have had to do that, but to separate this out, we still have to qualify under the guidelines. You have to have in-person services in order to utilize straight ARP funding. Anything else will require us to use money from the...
And if I may interrupt, what I will do instead is I will ask if, whether it's this committee or we as a body separately, if we can just take up the issue of how our employees were recognized and rewarded during COVID, because I'm not suggesting that ARP funding go places that it is not allowed to go. But what I am asking is that we have done everything that we can do as a body and as an organization to just recognize the work of our employees. So I will just separate that and pull it aside. And then my other question, which you don't have to answer as part of this, but it's a question that applies to every single thing that's remaining on this agenda, is I do want to understand, number one, how we're keeping track of all of the things that we are using our ARP funds for. What is the running total? How are we keeping track of that?
Sure.
How are we going to make council aware of that so that we're making decisions with that in mind? And that's not going to stop me from voting yes to this, because we got a lot left, but I want to make sure we're judicious. My other question, which you can answer as part of a subsequent item, is when is administration going to bring forward their overall recommendations for what we do with ARP funding? Because, again, it's not unlimited, and so each decision that we make goes against that total. And then finally, again, you can answer it as part of a separate one, is we solicited community input, and I'm just curious to know, when is that going to come back to us? When are we going to look at the ARP funding in a comprehensive way so that we're making sure we're prioritizing how we expend the funds for the benefit of the community? And I'm done now.
So those are a list of questions. I'm going to try to remember all, but I will say in terms of the looking at the comprehensive look. So we still, to this point, not just Richland County, but Treasury has not issued final guidance. So as we look at these things and we make these recommendations to you, we are still working with what the interim guidance is. Now, we do have community input, and because what we talked about is we really don't want to, what council has asked is, let's try to stay away from this, getting the details when you don't have documentation or data to review. So we do have that information, and we will provide that to you. And I guess when we provide it, I'll try to do more than just provide it to you. I guess I need to talk about it a little bit as well. So the idea was to give you that in the council packet as a part of the administrator's report. If you feel like it would be better served by going through the committee first and then doing that, I'm fine with doing that as well. But that was the plan, so that you can look at something and then have the ability to discuss it. In terms of the overall funding amount, assuming, I'm going to put my thumbs up right here, that you approve all the things that we're asking for, we do have ARP funding breakdown of what we've spent, what you have approved, and what that total would look like after those expenditures. So if you approve everything that we've had tonight, and council approves all of that, we will have spent $19.15 million. Okay, that will be the total that we will have spent. So that means we would have roughly $60 million remaining for items that the council wanted to put money for, which includes the broad plan was, some of it you've already done with nonprofits, but you had others that came in through the community input. You received requests, so those would be things you would look at. You would still look at other potential infrastructure needs that are associated with the ARP funding. That's one of the things that was in the broad brush that you talked about. You still have the opportunity to look at any broadband, any water, sewer, all of those things would still be part of that overall. And that funding would be something that you would be able to decide how you want to prioritize when we provide you with those list of things. So, yes, ma'am.
And thank you, Mr. Brown. Because I never thought I would sit down and say, well, $60 million isn't what it used to be, but $60 million isn't what it used to be compared against the great needs that our community has. And so I will look forward to seeing that report, and again, just making sure that we're not allocating piecemeal, and then we look and we have this whole pot of community needs, that we haven't really addressed. So thank you for the patience.
Sure, and to your point about just the money, we're running out of time, but to the point about the money, before the ARP funding was ever available, the county as an agency and the community had a large need. And the funding is designed to try to provide support in all of those areas. So you do have to prioritize. And the things that we put on here are areas where they fit into the priority categories for ARP funding use as well. So, but thank you.
And so before we move forward, I just want to make sure there's a couple of items here that I do think that we need to address from this body, because they were on our previous agenda and we did not have documents to review. And I would like for us to be able to spend time with that. Is there any further discussion about premium pay for this new group of 490 staff members?
Is that let me make sure, is that they would have at least had to have been in attendance in person at least one day or a couple of hours.
They definitely have to be at least one day because you have to be in person to qualify. Yes, ma'am, you have to be in person.
So you would have had to been in person,
Yes, ma'am.
in person at least one day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ms. Newton?
Madam Chair, I move to approve using ARP funding to pay stipends for those employees who worked in person on a modified schedule during the pandemic. $1,250.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, so if she uses modified, then that means that it could be any time, a half a day or whatever. Is that what we're accepting?
Modified schedule is what we called it when we talk to employees about their scheduling, so modified would be appropriate.
And why I'm saying that now is because I think it's going to be a lot of feedback if we don't say what modification means when they get ready to go, when the county goes out and people say, well, I worked one day. I came in one day. So unless you have some definitions, I'm scared that it's going to cause confusion.
I was using the language that staff provided, but I'm happy to accept.
But I'll let it go, and then we need to have that definition, Madam Chair, by the time it gets to council, at least some input in terms of what it means.
We can do that, Ms. McBride. Okay. I would just say to you that no matter what you do, you're
going
to have individuals that
I understand. That's just like the vaccinated people want money. Okay.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on premium pay? Hearing none, Ms. Black, if you will, please call the vote.
McBride?
Yes.
Livingston?
Yes.
Barron?
Yes.
Newton? Motion passed.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, the next item here is safety and security equipment.
Yes, ma'am. So these are items specific to Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. So I'm looking at page right now. This is 19 and 20. And what you have, if you look on page 20, is the breakdown of the recommendation of the items and the funding levels associated with it, and then the goal that these recommendations address. So I'll be verbal for those who may be listening and not looking at what we're looking at. We're requesting adding body scanners. These body scanners obviously reduce physical contact that will have to be required in order to, when people come into the detention center. We're looking at minimizing interactions between the public and staff to reduce exposure. So we're asking for secured employee parking. You see there we're looking at body cameras and tasers. We already have an agreement through the Sheriff's Department in terms of a provider that we use So this would allow us, as you see here, with the body cameras, when employees interact with each other as well as detainees, it would aid in contact tracing. And then when we deal with any issues related to employees and compliance, where you would normally have to, again, physically restrain someone, we want to reduce that, again, by allowing these tasers. Also, you have the request for the facility-wide security cameras, interior and exterior. Yes, we have cameras, but we want to provide updated and better equipment so that we can see all throughout the facilities, and again, reduce the number of interactions where you have individuals who have to be physically present all the time in spaces, limiting, again, the distance and their interaction. So those are all the requests that we have. We are asking council to approve these. And these items, I believe, we could publicly discuss because they're kind of general items. There may be some future items that we won't be able to discuss in public because they're more intensely security related, but we are recommending approval on these items, and we will ask the committee to consider that recommendation.
So it is a recommendation to purchase these items for, in the amount of $3,338,000. So with that, is there any discussion from the body?
Move, Madam Chair.
All right, discussion? Ms. Mc...
Go ahead.
No?
Okay. I guess I do have some concerns with the use of the funds, and I'm sure that they follow the guidelines, and most of it is, some of it is sort of punitive to me, but we look at a lot of brick and mortar and not the humanitarian part of it. So my question is, are funds set aside, or are detainees have the opportunity to get COVID shots?
So detainees have the opportunity to get COVID vaccinations, yes, ma'am.
And are we offering them that? Are they aware of it?
My understanding is that they are aware of it, yes, ma'am.
Because it's my understanding that some were not aware of it and that we were not offering it. And I want to know, how are we offering it and making sure that they know that they are eligible to get the COVID shot?
We can definitely make sure that that's happening, Ms. McBride.
Okay. So that's important to me, to ensure that that's in place. And because we're limited on time, I'll address the other concerns later in full council meeting.
Ms. Newton, and then Horatio.
I promise I'll be quick. So one, I'll just say, I have some concerns about tasers that we can just address later about whatever our policies are, et cetera. But related to this item right now, this is one-time money, and these are recurring charges. And so for the recurring charges, how is that being addressed? Have we confirmed that the detention center budget will be able to absorb those additional costs?
We can absorb the recurring cost. When we brought this recommendation to the body, we knew that would be something that we would have to do. So yes, ma'am, we can make that happen, and we need to make that happen.
Thank you.
Horatio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm just sitting in as current chair of the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center Committee, and Ms. McBride also serves on that committee, and wanted to be sure that we supported the detention center with these needs. I would probably have some questions about some other things, policies around tasers and things like that too. But we know that some of this needs to move quickly, and so I support this. I also just wanted to add that there are probably some other improvements that we can look at down the road for that might be COVID related. We're all sitting here with partitions between us. I would love to see maybe, if it were possible, some COVID money or some ARP money used for enhanced ability for detainees to perhaps visit with their counsel in a secured environment. I think that's unlike what we currently have going on right now at Alvin S. Glenn. So there's this, and then there's more, and I'm here for both of it, all of it. So thank you.
Further discussion about this item? Well, this is definitely an action item, and I will, entertain a motion.
It's been moved.
We're in discussion, weren't we? Thank you. If there isn't any further discussion, Ms. Black, if you will, please call for the vote.
McBride?
I'm going to say no, so I'm going as a consent item.
Livingston?
Yes.
Barron?
Yes.
Newton?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. And, Mr. Brown, we have items C and D. These are new items to us. They were added to our packet, for this meeting. So if you will give us a briefing on those items.
Sure.
And I would like to say that we'll probably need to have further discussion.
Okay.
As we did with items A and B in our previous meeting, to bring these back before this body.
Yes, ma'am. So item C, I believe I asked would to be the grant management software. In short, these ARP funds are a good example. So we receive these grant funds, and in terms of how we are keeping track of all of this information, as the document points out, we don't have a unified software that allows us to capture all that information and track it. We have different systems that we use to capture all this information. So what we're trying to do is, quite frankly, become more efficient at how we do our business. So the grant management software would be applicable to these funds as well as all grant funds that the county receives, and that's millions of dollars. So we certainly can come back to you with that, but that is why we're coming to you before that, with that item. Item D, which is the utilities delinquent receivables, that is an item where really there are two things associated with that. Since we're going to talk about this again in the future, some of this happened when COVID-19 first happened, and there was a lot of things that was going on. So the state came in and said, hey, don't cut people off. You know, we are keeping people from being cut off from their utility services. If you all remember that happened. Well, since that time, I think Richland County may be the only, I don't 100% know that, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but we are one of the few who have not reinstated shut-offs for delinquent and non-payment. So we have a utility system that's supposed to be a system that mainly sustains itself. So that's something that this committee did. They said, yes, we want to stop that. So we need to have this committee also say, yes, we need to start that up again, so that we can address that. So that's something. Now, how does that tie into what I'm asking for here? So the utilities item that we have is focused on the fact that we have individuals that we know who have been affected by COVID who cannot pay those funds. So we want to utilize, just like we do with the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, but internally, Richland County kind of has their own thing where we use to take care of these delinquent receivables for our utility system. So that's what that's about. And then the last thing, I'm not sure where it falls in because I'm looking at this, but the HVAC system, if you look at OSHA, which I'll have stuff in your packet, one of the things they tell you is ventilation is one of those areas where they really focus on when you're in a closed environment. So we have an older facility here. We know that we need to update our HVAC to increase the airflow, which would again be one of those measures that you're allowed to do under ARP funding, which would also then allow us to utilize capital dollars that you have to take care of other needs that the county needs to address. So those are all the items associated that we'll be bringing back to the committee at your request, Madam Chair.
Any discussion on those items? Because they will come before us.
Waiting to bring them back.
They will come back before us at our next meeting. If nothing further, the last item on the agenda is our adjournment.
General discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry, we did insert something. General
Chair,
discussion.
in the interest of time, I would move to adjourn.
You put it in and you take it out. Okay, so it's been moved and properly seconded for adjournment. Ms. Black, if you will, please.
McBride,
Yes?
Livingston, Barron,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.